In the chaos of our daily lives, it's easy to feel like we're drowning in a sea of stress and uncertainty. We move through our days reacting to pressure, expectations, emotions, and noise, hoping that somehow things will slow down, settle, and make sense. But the truth is, life doesn't calm down for us. We have to become calm within it. Today we're diving into powerful Stoic principles that have helped people for centuries remain grounded when everything feels uncertain, focused when everything feels overwhelming, and peaceful when life feels anything but. These ideas aren't abstract or distant. They are tools you can apply immediately in your work, your relationships, your inner struggles, and the quiet moments when your thoughts won't leave you alone. Whether you're dealing with stress, overthinking, emotional turbulence, or simply the feeling that there must be more to life than surviving one day at a time, this conversation is for you. And by the end of this video, you won't just understand Stoicism better, you'll understand yourself better. If this way of thinking resonates with you, if you're someone who values growth, reflection, and becoming stronger from the inside out, consider subscribing. Not as a favor, but as a quiet commitment to the kind of life you're choosing to build, one grounded in clarity, discipline, and purpose. Principle 1. Build a firm purpose. Most people don't realize how much of their stress comes from living without a clear inner direction, because on the surface their life looks full: work, relationships, responsibilities, goals. But underneath all of that motion there is no real anchor, no solid core holding everything together. And when the storms of life hit, which they always do, they find themselves emotionally shaken by every comment, every problem, every unexpected change, simply because nothing inside them feels stable enough to lean on. And this is where Stoicism begins, with the understanding that before you can master your emotions, before you can become calm, confident, and unshakable, you must first build something far more important than success, something far more powerful than motivation, and that is a firm purpose, because a person with a firm purpose moves through life differently. They don't drift. They don't panic when things go wrong. They don't collapse when plans fall apart, because they know where they are going and why they are going there, and that clarity alone removes half the suffering most people experience. A firm purpose is not a job title, a relationship, a bank account, or a dream house, because all of those things can change, disappear, or be taken away. But purpose is the set of values and principles you choose to live by no matter what happens around you. It is the internal compass that guides your decisions, even when you are tired, confused, or afraid. And without it, your life becomes reactive, controlled by moods, pressure, and external expectations, while with it your life becomes intentional, grounded in choices you make consciously instead of emotionally. And this is why people with purpose seem calm in situations that would destroy others, because they are not being pushed by life, they are moving through it with direction. Imagine trying to cross a massive ocean without a destination, no map, no compass, no idea where you are going, only reacting to the wind and waves, sometimes drifting into storms, sometimes into calm waters, but always uncertain, always anxious, always exhausted by the effort of staying afloat. And this is exactly what life feels like without a firm purpose. You wake up, respond to messages, deal with problems, chase deadlines, try to keep people happy, and at the end of the day you are drained but not fulfilled, busy but not satisfied, because none of that effort is connected to something deeper. And Stoicism teaches that this kind of life will eventually break you, not because the work is too hard, but because the soul cannot survive without meaning. Building this purpose requires honesty, the kind most people avoid, because it forces you to confront the gap between the life you are living and the life you know you should be living. It forces you to examine your habits, your relationships, your choices, and ask yourself uncomfortable questions like, what truly matters to me? What do I respect? What kind of person do I want to be when no one is watching? And what am I willing to sacrifice for the life I want to build? And this reflection is not easy, but it is necessary, because without it you will spend your years chasing things that look good on the outside but leave you empty on the inside. Your purpose does not arrive as a sudden lightning bolt. It is built slowly through reflection, experience, and decision, through moments where you choose discipline over comfort, integrity over approval, growth over familiarity, and every time you make those choices, your purpose becomes clearer, stronger, and more deeply rooted. Until one day you realize that you are no longer easily shaken by circumstances that once controlled your emotions, because now you know exactly what you stand for. Principle 2. Guard your mind. If your purpose is the foundation of your life, then your mind is the house built on top of it. And far too many people leave the doors and windows wide open, allowing every passing thought, opinion, emotion, and influence to wander in and rearrange their inner world. And then they wonder why they feel overwhelmed, exhausted, anxious, and mentally unstable, because a mind without boundaries becomes a battlefield, constantly invaded by stress, fear, comparison, negativity, and noise. And Stoicism teaches that the greatest act of self-respect you can practice is learning how to guard your mind deliberately, carefully, and consistently, because whatever you allow to live inside your mind eventually becomes your life. From the moment you wake up, the world begins competing for your attention, notifications, headlines, conversations, conflicts, opinions, expectations, and if you are not conscious of what you allow into your mental space, you become a collector of chaos, carrying around worries that were never yours, anger that doesn't serve you, and fears that were planted by other people's insecurities. And the more of this mental clutter you carry, the heavier your life feels, even when nothing around you has actually changed, because your suffering is not created by events alone, it is multiplied by the stories you tell yourself about those events. Stoicism reminds us that the mind is the only place where real freedom exists, because no matter what happens around you, no matter how loud the world becomes, you still have the power to choose what you focus on, what you believe, and how you interpret your experience. And this is why guarding your mind is not about avoiding reality. It is about choosing which parts of reality deserve your energy, your attention, and your emotional investment. Guarding your mind begins with awareness, noticing the patterns of your thoughts, recognizing when your inner dialogue becomes negative, judgmental, fearful, or self-destructive. And instead of accepting those thoughts as truth, you pause and question them, asking yourself whether this belief is helping or harming you, whether this worry is something you can control or something you must release, whether this emotion is something you should explore or something you should refuse to feed. And this simple practice of observing your thoughts instead of being controlled by them gradually returns your power to you. One of the most practical ways to guard your mind is by controlling your input, because what you consume mentally shapes how you think emotionally. And if your daily diet consists of bad news, online arguments, endless scrolling, and constant comparison, your mind will naturally become anxious, restless, and dissatisfied. While if you intentionally fill your mental space with wisdom, learning, meaningful conversation, and positive influence, your inner world becomes calmer, clearer, and more stable, not because life has become easier, but because your mind has become stronger. Another essential part of guarding your mind is learning to create distance between stimulus and response, because most suffering comes from reacting instantly without reflection. Someone says something that triggers you. Something doesn't go your way. Plans change unexpectedly, and before you realize it, your mood has collapsed, your energy is drained, and your peace is gone. But Stoicism teaches that inside the pause between what happens and how you respond lies your freedom, and the longer and more intentional that pause becomes, the less the world controls you. This is why daily practices like mindfulness, meditation, quiet reflection, or even simple breathing exercises are not just relaxation techniques. They are mental training. They strengthen your ability to remain present, aware, and calm even when life becomes chaotic, and with enough practice, you begin to experience a new kind of stability where external events still happen, but they no longer throw you into emotional chaos because you are no longer living inside every thought that passes through your mind. Guarding your mind also means learning how to choose your environment wisely, because the people you surround yourself with shape your thinking more than you realize. Their fears become your fears, their habits become your habits, their attitudes become your attitudes. And if you spend your time with people who complain constantly, chase drama, and live in emotional instability, it becomes almost impossible to remain peaceful and grounded yourself, while if you choose to spend time with people who value growth, discipline, reflection, and inner strength, your own mind begins to mirror those qualities naturally. Principle 3. Choose your response. At some point in life, you realize that what truly exhausts you is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. Because two people can face the exact same situation and experience completely different emotional realities. One collapses into stress, anger, and fear, while the other remains steady, calm, and focused. And the difference between them is not circumstance, it is response. And Stoicism places enormous power in this realization, because the moment you understand that you are not obligated to react emotionally to everything that happens around you, your life begins to change in ways that feel almost miraculous. Most people live in a constant state of reaction, reacting to messages, reacting to traffic, reacting to criticism, reacting to problems at work, reacting to family tension, reacting to disappointment, and this endless cycle of emotional responses keeps them trapped because every reaction pulls their energy outward, leaving them mentally exhausted and emotionally drained. And the more they react, the less control they feel they have over their own lives, while Stoicism teaches that the strongest person in any situation is not the one who dominates, shouts, or fights back, but the one who remains calm, aware, and in control of their own inner state. Choosing your response begins with understanding that you always have a choice, even when it feels like you don't, because although you cannot control what happens, you can always control what you think about it, what you say about it, and what you do next. And this choice becomes your greatest source of power, because once you stop giving your emotions permission to make decisions for you, your life becomes guided by intention instead of impulse. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic, your body floods with irritation, your heart rate rises, your mind begins creating stories about how disrespectful and careless they are, and before you realize it, your mood is ruined for the next 30 minutes, yet the other driver has already forgotten you exist, and this simple moment reveals a profound truth. Your suffering was not caused by the event, it was caused by the response you chose, and the more often you practice choosing your response consciously, the more control you gain over your emotional life. Stoicism does not teach emotional suppression, it teaches emotional mastery, acknowledging what you feel without allowing it to control what you do. And this requires learning how to pause, even for a few seconds, before you speak, before you act, before you decide, because that pause interrupts the automatic reaction cycle that keeps so many people trapped in regret, conflict, and unnecessary suffering. With practice, that pause becomes longer, and in that space you begin to see your options clearly. You can choose patience instead of anger, clarity instead of confusion, strength instead of fear. And every time you make that choice, you reinforce a new identity, the identity of someone who is no longer controlled by circumstance, but guided by character. The real power of choosing your response is that it shifts responsibility back to you, and while that may feel uncomfortable at first, it is the most liberating realization you can have. because it means your peace is no longer at the mercy of other people's behavior. Your mood is no longer dictated by traffic, deadlines, or comments, and your confidence is no longer fragile, dependent on everything going your way. You become stable, not because life becomes predictable, but because you become resilient. Over time, this practice transforms the way you experience the world. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable, conflicts that once triggered you now feel distant, and challenges that once filled you with anxiety now feel like problems to solve rather than threats to survive. And this emotional stability creates a deep inner confidence that cannot be faked or taken away. Principle 4. Learn to handle criticism. Criticism is one of the most powerful emotional tests in a human life because it strikes directly at the sense of self, and most people are not hurt by what is said, but by what they believe those words mean about them. From childhood onward, we are conditioned to seek approval, and as a result, the opinions of others become silent judges in our minds, shaping how we see ourselves and how we behave. Stoicism challenges this habit at its core by teaching that your worth is not created by anyone's praise or destroyed by anyone's disapproval, and until you internalize this truth, your peace will always be fragile. The moment you decide that your character, values, and effort matter more than public opinion, something inside you stabilizes and you begin to experience a new form of emotional freedom. Handling criticism does not mean ignoring it or pretending it does not hurt. It means developing the maturity to receive it without losing your center. When criticism arrives, the first instinct is often to defend yourself, justify your actions, or strike back. But Stoicism invites you to pause instead, to slow down the moment, and to ask yourself whether the criticism contains information that can help you grow. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not. The wisdom lies in your ability to tell the difference. When you are honest with yourself, you become less afraid of feedback, because even when the words are uncomfortable, your identity is no longer at stake. You are no longer trying to protect an image. You are trying to improve your life. Much of the pain of criticism comes from personalizing it, from assuming that the speaker's words define your value. But people speak from their own experiences, wounds, insecurities, expectations, and limitations, and when you understand this, criticism becomes less threatening. Often, it has more to do with the speaker's inner world than with your actual behavior. By seeing criticism through this lens, you can step out of the emotional storm and respond with clarity rather than reactivity. This does not mean you allow disrespect. It means you choose your battles wisely and refuse to give your peace to unnecessary conflict. Stoicism also teaches the importance of self-knowledge in handling criticism. When you understand your motivations, your standards, and your direction in life, outside opinions lose their power to shake you. You know who you are becoming, and this certainty becomes a foundation that protects you from being pulled in every direction by the judgments of others. Criticism no longer feels like an attack. It becomes either a lesson or background noise, and in both cases, you remain steady. Over time, this practice reshapes your emotional life. You become less defensive, more composed, more resilient, and more confident, not because people stop criticizing you, but because you stop depending on their approval for your sense of worth. You begin to speak and act more honestly, more courageously, because you are no longer performing for acceptance. This is one of the greatest freedoms Stoicism offers. The freedom to live according to your values rather than your fear of judgment. Principle 5. Transform offense into strength. Offense has a unique way of lingering in the mind, replaying itself long after the moment has passed, quietly poisoning your peace and draining your energy. Stoicism teaches that offense is not created by the event itself, but by your interpretation of the event. And once you understand this, you reclaim control over your emotional world. You cannot control what others say or do, but you always control the meaning you assign to it, and that meaning determines whether you suffer or grow. When someone offends you, your first reaction may be anger, sadness, or resentment. These feelings are natural, but they do not have to become your prison. Stoicism encourages you to observe these emotions without letting them dictate your behavior. In that moment of observation, you create space between yourself and the offense, and in that space lies your power. You can choose to turn the experience into training for your character, strengthening patience, compassion, and self-mastery. Reframing is a powerful tool in this process. Instead of asking, "Why did they do this to me?" you ask, "What can this teach me?" Perhaps it teaches you where your boundaries need to be stronger. Perhaps it shows you an emotional pattern you need to work on. Perhaps it reveals the limitations of the other person. In all cases, the offense becomes a teacher rather than a wound. Forgiveness plays a central role in transforming offense into strength. Forgiveness is not about excusing behavior or denying harm. It is about freeing yourself from carrying the weight of resentment. Holding on to anger does not punish the person who hurt you, it punishes you. When you release resentment, you reclaim your energy, clarity, and peace. Over time, you notice that fewer things disturb you, not because the world becomes kinder, but because your inner strength grows. Through this practice, you become emotionally unshakable. Offenses that once consumed your thoughts now pass through your awareness without taking root. You begin to move through life with a quiet dignity, rooted in self-respect rather than emotional reaction. Principle 6. Conquer fear and shame. Fear and shame are the two silent forces that shape more human lives than almost anything else, because they operate quietly beneath the surface, influencing decisions, limiting potential, and keeping people from becoming who they truly are. And most of the time we don't even realize how much control they have over us, because they disguise themselves as caution, humility, or realism, when in truth they are often just old beliefs, memories, and emotional wounds repeating themselves in new situations. Stoicism teaches that neither fear nor shame is born from reality itself, but from the stories we attach to reality. And when you learn how to examine and reshape those stories, you begin to reclaim enormous amounts of inner freedom. Fear usually comes from imagining a future that hasn't happened yet, and then reacting to it as if it already has, and the mind becomes a factory for worst-case scenarios, creating danger where none yet exists, and the longer those thoughts go unchallenged, the more convincing they become, until eventually they start controlling your behavior, your choices, and your life. The Stoic response is not to deny fear, but to face it calmly and directly, breaking it down into specific concerns and looking at each one with reason instead of emotion, because fear loses much of its power when it is seen clearly. When you ask yourself what exactly you are afraid of, why that fear exists, and what you could realistically do if the worst happened, you often discover that what once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable and sometimes even small. Shame works differently but is just as destructive because it keeps your mind anchored in the past, constantly reminding you of mistakes, failures, and moments you wish you could erase, and over time it creates an identity built around self-criticism, self-doubt, and unworthiness. Stoicism teaches that your past actions do not define your future self unless you allow them to, and that growth begins when you replace self-punishment with self-responsibility. This means acknowledging what happened, learning from it honestly, and then releasing it, not as an excuse but as a commitment to becoming better. Without self-forgiveness, shame becomes a prison. With it, shame becomes a lesson. One of the most powerful ways to conquer fear and shame is through deliberate exposure, not reckless, but gradual and intentional, placing yourself in situations that challenge your comfort zone just enough to stretch your confidence without overwhelming you. Each time you act despite fear, You send a message to your mind that you are stronger than your emotions, and each time you release shame, you make room for self-respect to grow. Over time, these small victories accumulate, building an inner resilience that allows you to face uncertainty with steadiness instead of panic, and mistakes with humility instead of self-destruction. Principle 7. Anticipate obstacles. One of the greatest mistakes people make in life is assuming that things will always go according to plan, and then feeling shocked, frustrated, or defeated when they don't. But Stoicism teaches that difficulty is not the exception, it is the rule, and when you accept this truth, you begin to approach life with preparation instead of disappointment. Anticipating obstacles is not about expecting the worst or becoming pessimistic. It is about developing the mental strength to remain steady no matter what happens, because when you are prepared for difficulty, it no longer controls your emotions or your decisions. The Stoic practice of anticipating obstacles trains your mind to imagine potential challenges in advance, not to worry about them endlessly, but to think through them calmly, considering how you would respond if they occurred. When you do this regularly, you reduce the emotional shock that often comes when problems arise, because your mind has already visited those possibilities and learned how to navigate them. This mental rehearsal builds confidence because you are no longer walking blindly into the future, hoping everything works out, but moving forward with awareness and readiness. Another essential part of this principle is flexibility, because life rarely unfolds exactly as expected, and rigid expectations create suffering when reality refuses to cooperate. By anticipating that plans may change, relationships may shift, and opportunities may vanish, you protect yourself from unnecessary frustration, and instead of collapsing when something doesn't go your way, you adjust, adapt, and continue forward. This ability to bend without breaking is one of the clearest signs of inner strength. Anticipating obstacles also encourages patience and perseverance, because when you expect challenges along the path, you stop interpreting difficulty as failure and begin seeing it as part of the process. Every setback becomes information, every delay becomes training, and every problem becomes another opportunity to practice resilience. Over time, you develop a long-term mindset that values consistency over quick success and stability over comfort, allowing you to keep moving even when progress feels slow. Through reflection on past experiences, you refine this ability, learning which strategies worked, which ones didn't, and how you can respond better next time. And as this awareness deepens, so does your sense of control over your own life. You cannot control what will happen, but you can always control how prepared you are to face it, and that preparation becomes a powerful source of calm, confidence, and endurance as you continue walking your path. Principle 8. Build inner strength. Inner strength is not something you are born with. It is something you build slowly, deliberately, and often painfully through the way you respond to life when it doesn't go your way. Most people assume strength comes from confidence, success, or power, but Stoicism teaches that true inner strength comes from something far deeper, the ability to remain steady when the world is not. When your inner world is strong, circumstances lose their ability to destabilize you, and even in moments of uncertainty, disappointment, or loss, you remain grounded in who you are and what you stand for. The first foundation of inner strength is learning the difference between what is within your control and what is not. Much of human suffering comes from fighting reality, from trying to control other people, outcomes, and situations that are beyond our influence. Stoicism frees you from this exhausting struggle by teaching you to invest your energy only in what you truly control: your thoughts, your values, your actions, and your responses. When you stop wasting emotional energy on what you cannot change, that energy becomes available for growth, discipline, and purpose. and your life begins to feel lighter, clearer, and more focused. Forgiveness becomes an essential part of building inner strength because holding on to resentment quietly weakens you, draining your attention and distorting your judgment. When you forgive, you are not excusing what happened. You are releasing yourself from the burden of carrying it forward. This release creates space inside you for peace, clarity, and emotional stability, and over time you realize that your ability to let go is not a weakness, but a powerful form of self-mastery. Gratitude strengthens the mind in a similar way. When you practice noticing what is already good in your life, even during difficult seasons, you train your attention to seek balance instead of despair. This does not mean ignoring problems, but learning to hold hardship and hope at the same time, which creates emotional resilience. A resilient mind does not collapse under pressure. It adapts, adjusts, and continues moving forward. Another essential aspect of inner strength is embracing vulnerability without becoming controlled by it. Fear, doubt, sadness, and uncertainty are part of being human, but they do not have to become your identity. Stoicism teaches you to acknowledge these emotions honestly without letting them dictate your behavior. You learn to act with courage even when you feel afraid, to remain patient even when you feel frustrated, and to continue growing even when you feel uncertain. Each time you do this, you reinforce your inner foundation, building confidence that does not depend on circumstances. Principle 9. Practice self-restraint. Self-restraint is the quiet force that separates a life of intention from a life of impulse, and almost every form of regret, stress, and self-sabotage can be traced back to moments where restraint was missing. Stoicism places enormous importance on this skill because it understands that the quality of your life is shaped less by your circumstances and more by your ability to govern your own behavior. When you learn to pause before acting, to think before speaking, and to choose your responses instead of being carried away by emotion, you begin to experience a sense of control and clarity that most people never reach. Modern life constantly pushes you toward instant gratification, immediate pleasure, quick rewards, emotional reactions, and effortless comfort. Yet these habits slowly weaken the mind, making it harder to focus, harder to endure discomfort, and harder to stay committed to anything meaningful. Stoicism teaches the opposite approach, delaying gratification, choosing discipline over comfort, and training yourself to remain steady even when your emotions are loud. This discipline does not make life colder or joyless. It makes life richer because you begin to live according to your highest values instead of your lowest impulses. One of the simplest but most powerful forms of self-restraint is learning to slow down your reactions. When something upsets you, the urge to respond immediately can feel overwhelming, yet every time you resist that urge, you strengthen your character. You create a small gap between stimulus and response, and inside that gap lies your freedom. With practice, that pause becomes natural and your behavior becomes calmer, more thoughtful, and more aligned with the person you are trying to become. Self-restraint also transforms how you communicate. In moments of conflict or tension, words spoken in anger often create damage that lasts far longer than the emotion itself. Stoicism teaches you to hold your tongue when necessary, to speak with intention rather than impulse, and to consider whether your words will improve the situation or simply release your frustration. Over time, this approach builds trust, respect, and stronger relationships because people sense the stability and maturity behind your presence. As self-restraint deepens, you begin to feel less controlled by cravings, distractions, and emotional swings. You are no longer constantly pulled in 100 directions by every desire or thought that appears. Instead, you move with purpose, choosing what deserves your energy and refusing to give your attention to what does not. This creates a powerful sense of inner order and stability, where your life begins to feel simpler, clearer, and more manageable. Principle 10. Accept reality and move forward. There is no greater source of suffering in human life than the refusal to accept what is, because the moment you begin arguing with reality, you create pain that did not need to exist. And Stoicism teaches that acceptance is not weakness, surrender, or giving up on your dreams. It is clarity, and clarity is the foundation of every meaningful change. When you accept reality, you stop wasting energy wishing things were different and start using that energy to shape what comes next. And this shift alone can transform the way you experience every challenge in your life. Most people confuse acceptance with resignation, but they are opposites. Resignation says, "There is nothing I can do," while acceptance says, "This is what is happening, now what will I do about it?" Acceptance does not remove your power, it restores it, because when you stop resisting the present moment, you finally see it clearly, and when you see clearly, you can act effectively. This is why Stoicism places acceptance at the center of emotional strength, because without it, every setback becomes a personal tragedy, and every obstacle becomes a source of endless frustration. Acceptance begins with the willingness to see things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. A relationship ends, a job is lost, plans fall apart, health changes, people disappoint you, and life moves in directions you never expected. Fighting these facts only deepens the wound, but when you allow yourself to acknowledge what is real, even when it hurts, something inside you softens, and in that softening you find space to breathe, think, and choose your next step wisely. Another powerful aspect of acceptance is letting go of perfectionism. Many people suffer not because their lives are truly unbearable, but because they expect life to be flawless. Stoicism teaches that imperfection is not a failure of existence. It is the nature of existence, and when you stop demanding that everything go exactly as planned, you free yourself from constant disappointment. You begin to appreciate progress instead of obsessing over perfection, and this shift makes life feel lighter, more forgiving, and more livable. Acceptance also extends to your relationships. People will not always meet your expectations, and when you stop trying to force them into the version of them you want, you begin to see them as they truly are. This does not mean tolerating harmful behavior, but it does mean releasing unrealistic expectations and approaching others with empathy, understanding, and clarity. When you accept people as they are, your relationships become more honest and more peaceful. And as you move forward from this moment, remember this: nothing in your life truly has the power to break you unless you give it permission. Every challenge you face, every thought you wrestle with, every emotion that rises within you is an opportunity to strengthen your character and deepen your understanding of who you are becoming. Growth is not loud. It is quiet, steady, and built through the choices you make when no one is watching. Before you go, take a moment to watch one of the videos on your screen. Each one is another step along this same path, toward clarity, resilience, and inner strength. And thank you, truly, for being a part of Psychresto Mind.